and welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Johnny DC.
And I'm his twin brother, Marvelous Joe.
And in this episode, we are reviewing the latest direct-to-video DC animated film, Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. I first read this comic around when the podcast came out. I loved it, but I loved the movie even more.
Yeah, it was a good film. I had no expectations going into it, but I was pleasantly surprised by how good it was. So I can't wait to talk about it.
Just a quick reminder that our next episode will be our team duel, where we finally find out who's going to win between the Flash's Rogues and the Brotherhood of Mutants from the X-Men.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm out of town this week, so that was going to be this episode, but we're going to push it back to next week. Really looking forward to it. Really grateful that the Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham movie came out this past week so we could review it.
Which we'll do later on in this episode. Before that, we're going to break down the comic book movie news to come out in the past week. All Marvel news until the Blue Beetle trailer comes out, but we're going to be talking about how Liv Tyler is returning as Betty Ross for Captain America: New World Order, and we got an official trailer for the Secret Invasion television series for Disney+.
As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic.
For those of you who listen to our recent episodes, you'll know that our duel simulator has become so advanced that it's gained sentience, and it's named itself the Artificial Life Form for Running Extensive Duels, just a rather very intelligent simulator 9000, or Alfred Jarvis 9000. He has a quick message for our listeners, so let's hear it.
Why, hello there. Do you love listening and chatting about Marvel and DC? Then become a part of the Dynamic Duel community on Patreon, where you can choose from 3 tiers. The Dynamic 2.0 tier lets you listen to this podcast without ads and gives you access to its Discord chat group, where you can chat with Johnny DC and Marvelous Joe. The Fantastic 4 tier gives you that and more with 2 bonus episodes each month, including bloopers and top 10 shows where Johnny and Joe count down your favourite Marvel and DC subjects. And finally, the X-Force tier makes you an executive producer of Dynamic Duel, where every month you help the host choose what to review and who to fight against each other. Check it out at patreon.com/dynamicduel. Pip pip cheerio.
Thanks, AJ9000, and thanks to everyone who supports the podcast. But with that out of the way,
quick to the no prize.
A No Prize is an award Marvel used to give out to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award we post on Instagram and in our email newsletter for the person that we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week. Last week's question was, if you could cast any musician as a character in a live-action Marvel or DC film, who would you cast and what role would they play? We got a lot of very... esoteric answers here. I'm not really keeping up with what the kids are listening to these days. So I had to do a lot of research for this particular No Prize, just so I could be well informed who these people were talking about. Jonathan, I know for sure you have no idea who any of these people are.
I was going to fight you, but you're probably right.
Let's go ahead and run down the honorable mentions as well as the No Prize winner. Our first honorable mention goes to Lizzie Dyer Arney, who said,
Hey, it's Lizzie, and I'm casting Nick Jonas as Nightwing. Now, like Dick Grayson, Nick Jonas was also a teen idol with his band of brothers before striking out on his own. He shined in films like Jumanji, and he was hilarious on Saturday Night Live. He'd make a great addition to the DCU, and I think there'd be a great soundtrack in there as well.
I've seen Nick Jonas, I think, in only one film, but I know he's done a few. I saw him in the Jumanji film. And like how Nick Jonas has, 2 other brothers whose names I can't remember, Nick Jonas and Rick Jonas and Dick Jonas.
There you go.
But like their brotherly bond, the Robins of the Batman family also have this brotherly bond. So there's a nice parallel there. I do think the guy resembles Dick Grayson, and a lot of the ladies love him. So I actually think this fits pretty well.
I don't think I could name a single Jonas Brothers song.
Don't lie to us. We all know you're their biggest fan. Come on.
I'm just wondering if this also means that Rick or Dick or whatever their names are would also be like Jason Todd and Tim Drake.
That would be interesting. I know there's a Joe Jonas.
Joe Jonas?
Joe Jonas. Jojo. I think they call him Jojo.
That's
pretty sure.
Some people listening to this are like, I hate you guys so much.
That's going to be the case for all these answers.
Great answer, Lizzie. Our next honorable mention goes to Miggy Matanguihan, who said,
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Miggy, and I would cast the Oscar award-winning musician Her as the DC hero Bumblebee. I chose her because she is half Filipino, so I just represent, you know, my culture. But in terms of Bumblebee, I just kind of chose Bumblebee. I could see her playing like a younger character like Rocket as well. Yeah, keep up the good work, guys.
This feels like a who's on first answer. Who's good for the role? Her. Who?
Yeah.
Her.
I think she probably did that on purpose. But no, I had to look her up, and she's actually incredible. I thought she'd be just some like generic musician to play Bumblebee, but she actually has a lot of charisma. She seems really well suited for a role like Bumblebee. Her music is pretty badass. She like sang at the Grammys and then played the drums. It was fucking epic. Like, I had no idea. She fucking rocked it. It was awesome.
Nice. Bumblebee is a cool character. She's had a lot of prevalence lately in cartoons. I think she's overdue for some on-screen time.
For sure. And if a musician were to play her, I honestly don't think you could do better than her.
Then who?
Her. You know.
Who?
All right. Our next honorable mention goes to Jacob Bell, who said,
Hey, what's up, guys? Jacob Bell here. I would definitely cast Jaden Smith to play Tim Drake, Robin. I think Jaden is a good actor. I wish he would act more. I love his music, and he's got the acting chops. He's got the, because of Karate Kid, he's kind of got the training and the fighting stuff definitely down. The age works out. The look is good. I think Jaden Smith as Tim Drake would be awesome.
Now, I didn't know Jaden Smith was a musician. I just thought he was an actor because I am completely out of the current music scene. But I looked up his songs as well. He did a song for the Spider-Verse soundtrack, which I loved. And the song that he dropped for that was actually really damn good. So, yeah, I like this a lot.
Yeah, I don't really keep up to date with his music, but I think he's a great actor. You know, going all the way back to The Pursuit of Happiness. I was incredibly surprised by how much I liked his new version of The Karate Kid. That's a fantastic movie. And I'm not sure how many other acting projects he's been in recently, but I agree. I think he would be a great Robin character. I know he's a fan of Batman. Didn't he wear that white Batman outfit to like a Kardashian event or something like that?
It was Moon Knight, for sure.
No. You wish.
We know that we've already gotten our first live action Tim Drake in the Titans television series. We just recently got our first look of what that Robin costume will look like. And it looks really cool. I think if they can adapt something similar for Jaden Smith, if he were to play Tim Drake, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, the Titans series has fantastic costumes. Fantastic.
We want to give a quick shout out to Colby Henches, Griffin, John Starosky, Ken Johnson, Matt Lamb, and Noah Terry for visiting our website and dropping their No Prize answers. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. But the winner of this week's No Prize is Brandon Estergard, who said,
Hey guys, I would cast Wu-Tang Clan's Method Man as X-Men's Bishop. Not only is he a huge fan of the character, he would fit the part really well. Bishop's also a character that definitely deserves more screen time.
And you know why I had to go with this answer, right?
Wu-Tang!
Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. That's why. Yes, Method Man as Bishop, I think would be freaking awesome. Method Man did guest star in the Luke Cage television show, so he might make a good Luke Cage too, but I think he actually really looks like the character of Bishop from the comics.
Yeah, it seems like he's a really big Marvel fan, which is a huge plus as well.
Yeah, I think he's actually had a few podcasts about Marvel.
Yeah, I recently just learned that. That's awesome. That's really cool. I mean, it would be better if it was DC, but still.
I know that he played Ben Urich in the Marvels podcast.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. The best answer I heard for this question of the week actually came in the Discord, but nobody submitted it, which is a shame. But somebody suggested Ozzy Osbourne as Mephisto, and I could not think of a better answer. Like, if they would have submitted that, that would have won the No Prize.
I was expecting at least one person to say, like, Gene Simmons for Lobo, but no.
A lot of great stuff left on the table. Everybody who called in, their answers were pretty good, so we'll be posting them to our Discord and discussing them on that chat server. But congrats again to Brandon Estergard for winning this week's No Prize. If you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. And now that that's done,
on to the news!
All All right, and a bit of surprising news. Actually, I think this is some of the most surprising news that we've gotten in a while. We learned this past week from The Hollywood Reporter that Liv Tyler from the 2008 Incredible Hulk film starring Edward Norton will be returning as Betty Ross in the upcoming Captain America New World Order film, which is awesome. We've been waiting to see Betty Ross again ever since that original movie. It's almost like the MCU just kind of forgot about her and her supporting role alongside the Hulk. I think it'll be really fascinating to see Mark Ruffalo interact with the same actress that was in that Edward Norton movie.
Liv Tyler could be like, wow, you look really different, Bruce.
Yeah, maybe we might get an in-universe explanation as to why Bruce Banner's face changed.
Yeah, totally. That'd be actually kind of cool.
There are a lot of rumors that Thunderbolt Ross is going to be the Red Hulk in this movie, so I'm wondering if they're going to make Betty Ross Harpy in this upcoming movie, who is a Gamma Mutate, formerly the Red She-Hulk from the comics. So we might see Liv Tyler as a hero or villain in Captain America New World Order. It's really shaping up to seem like this new Captain America movie is like the Incredible Hulk 2. Kind of like how Thor Ragnarok was also kind of a Hulk film, in addition to a Thor movie.
Right, especially because we know that Tim Blake Nelson is going to be the villain of the film as the leader.
Right. And of course, we know that the Hulk still can't have his own film due to a distribution rights disagreement with Universal and Disney.
Yeah, Universal's never going to give up those rights. There's like no reason for them to do that.
They'll expire eventually. But for now, I like this idea of a Cap Hulk movie team up. In other news, we got the official trailer for Marvel Studios' Secret Invasion. Now, those of you who have listened to the show for a while know that I loved the teaser trailer we got a few months back. I even nominated it as a contender for Best Trailer of last year in our Brothers Awards because I thought it did a great job of portraying paranoia and conspiracy type thriller that the Winter Soldier movie was. This recent trailer that dropped this week was probably the exact opposite of the previous teaser trailer in that this new trailer didn't really drop anything new. It was basically Samuel Jackson walking around like a badass as Nick Fury talking about how he has to put a stop to this Skrull issue. But we barely even see any Skrulls.
I mean, that we know of.
That's true. And, maybe seeing a Skrull might be a spoiler or something like that. But I don't know. I just think they should have shown us more in this trailer in order to draw up excitement for it, because I don't think this trailer was very exciting.
It's very Nick Fury focused once again. And I was kind of surprised because I was under the impression that Emilia Clarke's character, who I guess is Talos' daughter, was going to be the protagonist of the series.
Well, the Talos' daughter thing was a revelation by a Vanity Fair article, which I actually think was much more interesting than this trailer. If you guys haven't read the Vanity Fair article about Secret Invasion, they have a lot of great new photos in there. Photos that weren't in this preview, as well as some revelations like who Emilia Clarke is playing, who is in fact Talos' daughter from the Captain Marvel film, which is a reveal that the showrunners of Secret Invasion don't necessarily consider a spoiler, as stated in that article.
It definitely seems like there's two factions of Skrulls, and I guess we saw this in the teaser as well. One that's like on Talos' side and one that's against Talos.
Yeah, the side that's being led by Kingsley Ben-Adir's character.
I feel like it's honestly difficult to discuss this trailer more than what we got in the teaser trailer because it's just all so mysterious.
Exactly, yeah. It's just basically a lot of vague statements followed by badass shots of Nick Fury. And there's nothing really more to be said. Check out the Vanity Fair article if you're interested in Secret Invasion, I would say. I'm still looking forward to the show. We got a release date for it of June 21st on Disney+. It's going to be 6 episodes long, so it's going to run into August. And despite the lackluster quality of this trailer, I think it's still going to be really, really good.
I mean, you call the trailer lackluster. I still think it was a quality trailer that will get people excited for it. It's just, there's not much to talk about.
It's not going to get anybody more excited who wasn't already.
Yeah, possibly, probably.
But definitely check it out when it comes in a few months. I assume that we will be getting another trailer for this at some point in the future.
But speaking of trailers, that brings us to our question of the week. What has been your favorite Marvel or DC trailer of all time, and why?
Yeah, which trailer got you the most excited for its upcoming project? It could be film, it could be television series, just which one stands out in your mind the most from history.
Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message could be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and award that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to Instagram and our email newsletter. Be sure to answer before April 8th. But that does it for all the news for this episode. Let's go ahead and move on to the main event, where we review the latest DC animated direct-to-video film, Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. Okay, Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham is DC's latest direct-to-video animated film, a standalone story that adapts a 3-issue Elseworlds comic series written by Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, and Richard Pace. I first read the series before we started this podcast, and I thought it was incredible, so I was pretty excited when I heard that DC was adapting this to an animated film. I love DC Elseworlds stories, which are often standalone and take place outside of DC's standard continuity, because you could break the rules and raise the stakes, and that's absolutely the case for The Doom That Came to Gotham.
Yeah, I really like this film. I thought it would be more like a Batman story with Lovecraftian elements, but to my surprise, it was more like a Lovecraft story with Batman in it.
Yeah, totally. There are a lot of surprises and Easter eggs in this story, even more in the film than in the comics. So I definitely recommend watching the movie before listening any further to this spoiler review. Now, the story borrows a lot from the literary works of H.P. Lovecraft, as you mentioned, who is one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, so much so that he literally inspired his own subgenre known as Lovecraftian horror, which this film would fall under. Lovecraft imagined an entire pantheon of these malevolent deities and cosmic horrors that defied description and devastated the minds of the characters that saw or even learned about them. His most famous creation, obviously, is Cthulhu, but there are dozens of other monstrosities that he wrote about, and there are quite a few analogs in The Doom That Came to Gotham. I only have a cursory knowledge of the Cthulhu mythos, but I believe this film's dreaded antagonist, Yog-Sothoth, is based on Lovecraft's Yog-Sothoth, also known as the Beyond One, the Lurker at the Threshold, or the Key and the Gate, whose Karazos cult probably inspired the comics Cult of Ghoul. The Testament of Ghoul, I believe, is an analog to the Necronomicon, this book of forbidden knowledge that drives readers insane that appears in many Lovecraft's works. For fans of Lovecraft, this movie has a treasure trove of Easter eggs, and for casual viewers, it at the very least serves as a gateway into Lovecraft's incredibly well-imagined mythos.
Yeah, I've only been tangentially aware of H.P. Lovecraft's pulp horror stuff, but this movie actually has me fascinated to dive deeper into his works, because all of his works are in the public domain, so I'm kind of actually surprised that his stuff isn't adapted more. I think most recently we saw a lot of his stuff in Lovecraft Country, the HBO television series, but I haven't seen that.
That was good. That was really good.
I want to watch that. I want to read his books. It all seems really freaking cool.
The main reason I haven't read his books is because I'm afraid to. His pantheon just seems so real.
Oh, so you're afraid that you'll read it and then all of a sudden join the cult of Cthulhu or something?
I feel like I'd be forced to.
What?
People are just kidnap me, put me in van, be like, you know too much. Now you know. I don't know.
Stupid.
But Lovecraftian Easter eggs aren't the only treats to be had in this film. Since it's a standalone Elseworlds tale set outside of DC continuity, there are lots of twists to familiar characters in Batman's cast, such as a frozen zombie that resembles Mr. Freeze, a psychic take on Barbara Gordon capable of communing with the dead, or a version of Two-Face that's so deformed his wormy flesh branches off his body and covers a wall. It's horrifying. Some twists are more malevolent, such as turning Green Arrow into a noble paladin, and some twists were made only for the movie, such as turning Jason Todd into a young Indian orphan named Sanjay Todd, or replacing Tim Drake with an amalgam of Cassandra Cain and Carrie Kelly named Kylie Kane.
Yeah, that blew my mind when I realized that these kids were supposed to be the Robins, because obviously we knew who Dick Grayson was, but it wasn't until Alfred referred to Sanjay as Mr. Todd that I realized, oh my god, Sanjay is just a audio anagram kind of Jason. Sanjay, Jason.
Yeah, exactly. It's really cool.
And it's more interesting that Bruce Wayne kind of picked them all up as his wards during his travels and education on becoming Batman.
Yeah, I thought that was actually a really cool take on how he came to adopt his sidekicks. But also, H.P. Lovecraft was notoriously racist, so it was nice to introduce some ethnic diversity in a film inspired by his work.
Oh, damn. Well, maybe I don't want to read his stuff anymore. Jeez.
There are a number of other changes made in the film that I think were an improvement to the source material, actually. Like in the comics, Bruce never communes with his father, Thomas Wayne. He spoke with the university librarian, Professor Manford, instead, and it wasn't in Arkham Asylum, a location I don't remember being in the comic books, even though the name Arkham was based on the name of a fictional city in Lovecraft's books.
Oh, interesting.
Batman also never fell into a Lazarus pit in the comics, and I think it was smart to do it here, as it not only has ties to Ra's al Ghul, but because it also helps explain Bruce's steep descent into madness afterward. Those are just a few of the changes, but I preferred all of the changes they made, and in an almost sad way, I feel like the film makes the comics obsolete.
I don't always mind when that happens, actually. While reading the source material is always fun, it takes longer than watching a movie, you know?
True, although this is a pretty quick read. It's only 3 issues. Now, I say almost sad because I did really enjoy this movie, and I think mostly because of how its Elseworld nature allows it to have such incredible stakes. People die, the entire world is threatened, and Batman is changed forever. It's a tragedy, which is rare in the superhero genre. In dramatic storytelling, a tragedy is defined as a serious story with a sad ending with the intention of teaching a lesson, as opposed to a comedy, which is a humorous story with a happy ending intended to entertain. The superhero stories are often intended to entertain. We go into them knowing that the good guy is going to win, that good will prevail, and though the ultimate threat in this movie is conquered, it's not by Batman. Bruce Wayne is essentially dead at the end, and Gotham literally burned down. I don't value entertainment as much as I do a strong theme or lesson. It's one of the reasons I think I prefer DC, and one of the reasons why I really liked this movie.
Marvel has its share of tragic tales. You don't know what you're talking about.
Name one! Besides Spider-Man.
Gwen Stacy.
Fuck. I said besides Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man does do tragedy the best, I think.
Yeah, as does Batman for DC.
But also look at characters like the Hulk or the X-Men. You know, a lot of tragedy there too.
There's actually been a number of tragic Batman tales. I think one of them being The Dark Knight.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And to an extent, even The Batman.
Yeah, I can see that.
Now, the overarching theme of this film was how the sins of the father pass on to the son, and how one's actions can have cascading consequences for their family down the line. It's a cautionary tale, one that I thought made perfect use of the dread associated with Lovecraft's monsters, but also a tale where mystery and horror and action were able to intertwine almost effortlessly in a way that made for near perfect pacing.
There was a little bit of a drag after Bruce fell into the Lazarus pit and was kind of like dwelling in his madness, trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
But it was over quick.
Yeah, there were some parts that were a little slow, but for the most part, I was glued to the screen, despite the fact that the animation left quite a bit to be desired, I felt.
Yeah, it was kind of like a throwback to the previous DC animated movie universe, inspired by Bruce Timm's animation, but with a Mike Mignola twist. A little bit.
See, I didn't get the Mike Mignola art style in this at all. I wish it was there. I wish it was very prevalent.
It was there. There were some shots where I was like, oh, that's totally Mike Mignola's work right there, that shot.
He didn't do the art for the series. I actually didn't love the artwork in the comic series. I wish he did, because I love his art style. It's so unique and so different from any other artist out there.
Yeah, I like his Hellboy for sure. And it was cool to see like that really dark shading in some shots for this movie.
Yeah, I follow him on Instagram, and I'm just always in awe of even his sketches. They're great. I wish the animation was better. The only other drawback to the film, and it's a big one, is that if you're not a fan of Batman or of Lovecraft, so much of this movie is just going to go over your head. Because as I mentioned earlier, so much of this film is homages to other works.
That's true. Yeah, you kind of need to know all of the Easter eggs in order to get those references.
Exactly, yeah. There's like a lot of homework for this film.
But like so much of this movie was me going like, oh, that's going to be Mr. Freeze. Oh, that's Carrie Kelly. Oh, that's the Necronomicon. Things like that.
Exactly. Now, I'm assuming most of the listeners of this podcast are fans of Batman and his cast of characters, though. So let's talk about those characters in our character breakdown, starting with Batman. Now, Batman and Bruce Wayne were voiced by David Giuntoli, who last voiced the character in the direct-to-video standalone animated film Batman Soul of the Dragon, which we reviewed, which we loved, and I think Giuntoli did an even better job voicing the character in The Doom That Came to Gotham. It was like a mixture between Kevin Conroy and Christian Bale and Keanu Reeves from League of Super Pets. I thought he nailed it, and it may be my favorite Batman voice in this post-Conroy world we live in now.
I still like Jensen Ackles a little bit more from The Long Halloween and the new Tomorrowverse. But yeah, this guy really nails it as well.
Now, it's often theorized in the comics that Bruce Wayne is crazy, but in this tale, his trauma goes so far beyond just seeing his parents murdered, but also being attacked by bats/spirits immediately afterward who spoke to him and showed him the eye of Ioxatha, who inspired the murder of his parents.
This was one of the best things that I think the film did for the mythos of Batman. Because, yeah, we all know that Batman's crazy. He was driven kind of mad by witnessing his parents' death. But this takes that aspect and then adds a Lovecraftian twist where a lot of the protagonists in those stories go mad upon seeing these elder deities. It combines the two, and it gives a rationale for Batman's madness and why he would pursue becoming this bat creature that I think works really well.
So well, so good. Like, that eye haunted him his entire life, and it forced his mind to like block certain memories while driving him to travel around the world and learn and train and gain allies that he, instinctively felt he was going to need.
It's a better rationalization for that type of motivation, I think, than just, wanting revenge,
I don't disagree.
Because honestly, at that point, become the Punisher, right? It's much easier than learning every single martial art and science known to man.
Yeah. Now, traveling the world and tracking bizarre activity, it all culminates in the Penguin's failed Antarctic expedition, and Bruce is driven back to Gotham, where his memories begin to return, and he begins a slow descent into madness as he uncovers a plot by an ancient cult to unleash an unspeakable evil on the world. The mental blocks he put up made him believe that everything in the world has a scientific explanation, but over the course of the film, he learns and is forced to embrace that some things defy logic, including that he can save Gotham by sacrificing himself to the spirit of the bat.
That was one of the great things I think this film did too, was that I've always wondered why, for as smart as Batman is, why characters like he and Lex Luthor never delve into magic, being as smart as they are.
It's one of the reasons I think why some filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and Matt Reeves are very hesitant to sort of open up their world to other DC characters. Because, yeah, once Batman learns about a character like Constantine, he's going to be like, oh, yeah, I could use that in my crusade against crime. I'm going to learn about occultism and stuff like that. Or just use other tools or resources like nth metal in his gadgetry and stuff like that, It doesn't make sense for him not to.
But here, he succumbs to this madness and really delves into this occultism,
Yeah.
And it was kind of refreshing to see him step into this pentagram sigil that he made and kind of become the bat,
Yeah, it was new, it was unique. And that symbol of the bat is fascinating in the story. Evil in this story is often depicted as reptilian as opposed to mammalian, with bats being the only mammal capable of flying. But also, as the film describes, they're capable of seeing through the darkness. It's a creature of the dark and therefore is unafraid of it and knows its secrets. It's a great explanation for why the symbol of the bat works beyond the notion that criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot and would be afraid of a giant bat.
This works so well. It's so well done. I think I've explained a few times along the way of this podcast how I'm not a fan of Batman. I think he's super lame.
Fuck you.
And he sucks. But slowly but surely, when I see films like this, The Doom That Came to Gotham, and you see how something like a bat can be a much better symbol than I ever suspected, I really start to come around and understand why the character of Batman is so lasting and transmutable and adaptable.
Oh, yeah.
And well liked by the masses.
Just taking like a film like this and like something like Batman Soul of the Dragon, and you're right, it's amazing how many different genres and ways Batman works in different stories.
It makes me want to see a Spider-Man story take place in a Lovecraftian universe, you know? We get things like Spider-Man Noir and stuff like that, but I like to see it go more all out.
And it's cool because you could actually do that with a character like Spider-Man because of the Spider-Verse.
Right. Spiders are also, you know, monstrous figures in darkness.
Stop ripping off DC. It's already been done. Oh, one quick thing I want to note on with Bruce Wayne is that in this movie, he seemingly has like no secret identity at all, but it kind of works because he's not Bruce Wayne in Gotham for very long.
Well, it seems like a lot of characters who are involved in this situation know that he's Bruce Wayne, but his identity doesn't really matter to the public at large in regards to the events that happen here.
Possibly, yeah. Moving on to Kylie Kane, she was voiced by Tati Gabrielle, who's been in a number of Netflix series. I haven't really seen any of them, but I thought she did a good job. As I mentioned earlier, Kylie is a stand-in for Tim Drake in the comics, but a welcome one. Her role in the story is very passive. I was actually hoping like the film would introduce her as Robin in some way, but she acts as an audience surrogate for a lot of events that happen away from Bruce, separate from Bruce, such as the deaths of Dick and Sanjay or observing Oliver Queen. She's this archetype of innocence, the foil to all the madness and evil in the story, and the personification of what Batman was trying to save. At the end, she recognizes that Bruce sacrificed himself to save the world and uses his legacy to rebuild a brighter and better Gotham City.
Yeah, at first I thought she was just Carrie Kelly. It wasn't until the very end when they announced her as Kylie Kane that I realized that she was also Cassandra Cain.
Yeah, I mean, it made sense to make her a Cassandra Cain analog since she's Chinese. But I also did really appreciate the homage to Carrie Kelly, the Robin from The Dark Knight Returns. That was cool. Moving on to Oliver Queen, he was voiced by Christopher Gorham. This is a considerate departure from the Green Arrow character in DC Comics proper. He's less of a Robin Hood type character here, and much more of a crusader burdened by the guilt of his father's actions, both in helping awaken Ayog-Sotha and killing Bruce Wayne's parents. Like Bruce, Oliver traveled the world, but as a hunter, preparing to eventually face the beast he knew was coming, though ultimately, he was not the one chosen by destiny to do so. I liked that they made Oliver and Bruce childhood friends. You know, they've often been recognized as being very similar characters, though they managed to differentiate them in this film considerably by making Oliver a drunken bootlegger during Prohibition. Though actually, now that I think about it, I guess in that regard, he was a bit of like a Robin Hood outlaw. I like that. That was actually pretty smart.
Yeah, except he didn't use just arrows here. He used all sorts of holy weapons.
Yeah, that was interesting. Moving on to Harvey Dent, he was voiced by Patrick Fabian. There's a lot of tragic characters in this film, but no more so than probably Harvey Dent. Harvey's always been depicted as a tragic figure in the comics, but in this story, you know, it's not like his father was one of the ones that awakened Ayog-Sotha in the past. He has no knowledge of the cult of Ross or any kind of angry or evil streak that we saw. He was an innocent bystander, helpless to what happened to him, and it was so much more horrifying what happened to him in this story than any other depiction of the character ever. Like, it almost defies description, how one side of his body just became a cosmic gateway.
Yeah, it was less of like a scarring on half his body and more of like this grotesque mutation given to him, strangely enough, by Poison Ivy, whose inclusion in this story was just bizarre.
It didn't feel weird to me when I read it in the comics because the Lovecraftian monsters that they were dealing with did have like a reptilian side, but also a plant side. Like the character that is sort of like Killer Croc, that reptile man. In the comics, when I first saw him, I thought it was an analog to Swamp Thing just because of the character design initially. I think it's actually meant to be a mixture of both.
You might be right because it's Killer Croc, but with like his long snout broken off. So it's just the skull area around there, which gives him kind of a Swamp Thing appearance.
Yeah, and in the comic artwork, he had almost like plants growing on his shoulders. At least that's what I initially thought. But we do learn later on in the film that, you know, before mankind, there were reptilian lizard men on Earth that Ra's al Ghul discovered. So it works on multiple levels, the whole plants and reptiles thing. So again, Poison Ivy, I thought she made sense.
She did look cool in her monstrous form going up against Green Arrow.
She looked way cooler in the movie than she did in the comics. It looked really cool. Yeah.
I thought that was effective. What I didn't think was effective, though, was how she transferred the mutation onto Harvey Dent and like why they picked him and everything. She just kind of like rubbed some poop on his hand or something like that. It was really strange. And it like spread across the left side of his body. It would have been better if she actually like rubbed the poop on his face a little bit, like on his cheek or something. And I call it poop because I don't know how else to describe it. It was brown. It was a brown smudge. But yeah, she was like trying to seduce him as she was walking by anyway. It would have been, I think, just more effective and a little bit more appropriate considering he is Two-Face if she touched his face.
Yeah, just like a romantic brush of the cheek with her hand or something like that.
Yeah.
I agree. The only other characters I want to touch on briefly, because there are a lot of characters in this film, but there's actually very few that have substantial screen time. I want to talk about Talia al Ghul and Ra's al Ghul. There's not much to say here other than I liked how these characters were used for the story. Like Ra's al Ghul has always been one of Batman's more ancient and mysterious villains. So for him and his daughter to have ties to cults and jinn and lizard people and cosmic horrors, it was a great take, and honestly, one that's more interesting to me than him simply being an eco-terrorist in the comics. I wish they would do more supernatural things with him in the comics.
Well, they have in the past. He has ties to the Lazarus Pits, which have like ties to the occult and stuff like that, right?
I mean, beyond that, like, he's not busting out jinn in the comics,
That would be cool if he did that, yeah.
And it's like, why not?
But then I guess Batman would have to enlist the help of characters like Constantine or Etrigan more often. Etrigan being used pretty well in this film, I think.
Yeah, he wasn't really so much of an analog in this movie as he was basically lifted straight from DC Comics proper, except for the fact that he was somehow powerful enough to stop an outer god as powerful as Ayog-Sotha. Because in the Lovecraft universe, Yog-Sothoth is like the embodiment of like space-time. So for Etrigan, this like middling tier demon to be able to defeat and banish to hell that giant of an entity, it's a little far-fetched.
With magic, it's always vague, He might have had some kind of like special spell granted to him as like the chosen demon to defeat this entity thing. Who knows?
Well, yeah, it was actually like that in the comics, if I remember correctly. And that was one thing I didn't think they did well enough explaining in the movie, was that I think Etrigan was an offspring of Ayog-Sotha and was destined to banish him to hell.
It kind of makes you wonder what Bruce Wayne was destined to do as Man-Bat, essentially. He becomes Man-Bat in this movie. And I think even the character of Man-Bat has an analog in the film. He's the Langstrom guy, right?
Yes, yeah.
The guy who studied the bats. But really, it seemed like his only function was to release Etrigan.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were several mentions of like the spirit of the bats and Flame being able to defeat Ayog-Sotha.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of felt random, but then again, they did mention how the bat sees through the darkness and, Flame pierces the darkness. So maybe that's the rationale.
Yeah, it was really a Batman-Etrigan combo.
Yeah, it's like Etrigan needed Batman to track down everyone so that he could deliver the final blow.
I'll accept that, yeah.
Me too. Moving on to the story highlights. Bruce Wayne and his wards Dick Grayson, Sanjay Todd, and Kylie Kane discover the reportedly missing and frozen remains of an Antarctic expedition crew led by Gotham University professor Oswald Cobblepot. While searching for the still missing crew members, Oswald and a man named Grendon, Bruce spots Oswald and follows him into an ice cave, where he finds Grendon trying to break through the ice to reach a spawn of Ayog-Sotha trapped in the ice. While Bruce fends off eldritch penguins, Brendan breaks through the ice and reaches the Great One, which impregnates Grendon with its seed before Bruce knocks Grendon out.
That sounds gross the way you described it right there.
That's how they describe it.
Who's they?
The movie.
Impregnates with his seed?
Yes.
I still don't like it then.
Not like it through his mouth, though.
Yeah, he puts a tentacle in his mouth.
Is that any better?
No.
Now Bruce blows up the ice cave to seal it before returning to his ship with his wards and Grendon, who's locked in the freezer. While going through Oswald's journal, Bruce gleans that Gotham City is in danger and decides to return home after 20 years.
I kind of like this Ernest Shackleton vibe that they gave Bruce in this movie.
Yeah.
He was very much like a explorer adventure type character at the start.
Right.
And then you learn like he's a man of science and everything, just finishing his journey on traveling the world. I thought it was really a great take.
I also loved like the Thing vibes that the film opened up with.
Yeah.
And the Thing, the movie, I think you can consider Lovecraftian horror.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I didn't think about that until this moment, but absolutely. Yeah. One of the great horror classics of all time.
The Penguin, I thought, was very interesting in this movie as well. Just how he became like mutated and this other thing, just like destined to walk the ice forever.
I thought we were going to see more of him later. I thought he was a little bit underutilized here, but I guess it kind of made sense considering that he was one of the founders of Gotham City and therefore was like paying for his crimes with this everlasting curse.
Yeah, it made more sense in this movie than it did in the comic, because in the comic, he wasn't one of the 4 founders of Gotham.
Interesting.
He was just a university professor that kind of stumbled upon the cult and the book. Now, upon seeing Gotham again, Bruce remembers the night his parents were killed by a raving lunatic with a knife, and how, as a boy, he fled afterward to a church belfry, only to be attacked by bats and bombarded with strange visions. Sanjay stays aboard the ship to guard Grendon, while Bruce and the others return to Wayne Manor, where Kylie discovers a dead body. While investigating, Bruce has a vision of the body telling him its name is Kirk Langstrom, who, of course, in the comics is the scientist that becomes Man-Bat, one of Batman's villains.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time, and it didn't dawn on me until later on in the film when it turned out that he and his father were like such experts on bats. I was like, well, what's the analog here? Oh, it's got to be Man-Bat.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they made Kirk Langstrom like one of the sons of the 4 founders of Gotham, and how like he thought he was the chosen one to take up the spirit of the bat, but ultimately he wasn't the one destined. That evening, Bruce is visited by Jason Blood, who warns Bruce, among other things, that he must die to save Gotham, and that Gotham must burn in order to be saved. When Bruce confronts Jason Blood, he transforms into Estergard the Demon and escapes the manor. Afterward, Bruce, Dick, and Kylie visit Bruce's childhood friend, the now alcoholic and secretive Oliver Queen, where they are surprised by Bruce's other childhood friend, Harvey Dent, who is days away from being elected mayor of Gotham City. Bruce asks Harvey about Kirk Langstrom and learns he was a troubled biologist who studied bats at Gotham University. This was one of the slow moments in the film, I felt, but it was also just the start of Bruce delving into the mystery of everything in Gotham.
Yeah, it was a lot of setup, but eventually, fortunately, it all paid off. Especially the Oliver Queen stuff, though. I was like, what are they doing with this character? Like, he's just being a drunk dummy this whole movie, it seems like.
Yeah.
And then slowly, that all got revealed. That he was a bootlegger, and that he was, this holy warrior of sorts as well.
Yeah. Now, while staying at Oliver's manor, Bruce escapes for the night under the guise of Batman, and stops some corrupt police officers from looting Kirk's apartment, where Batman finds hidden evidence of occulticism and Kirk's final statement. In Kirk's writing, Batman learns of the cult of Ghoul that is looking for a book, the Lost Testament of Ghoul, in order to summon an ancient cosmic horror, the ultimate outer god known as Ioxatha.
I liked the cool random devices that Batman would use, like the eyepiece thing that he wore to discover Langstrom's journal.
Yeah.
It felt very Hellboy to me. Like these just random like gadgets. Although, this one wasn't based in the occult, but I could totally see the Hellboy influence. But where Hellboy stories largely take place in the present, the gadgets of this Victorian era are more apt for Batman.
Yeah, totally. Now, deducing that Oswald had the book, Batman makes his way to Gotham University, where he tricks the university librarian, Professor Manford, into revealing the book's location just as Talia al Ghul emerges and steals the book after using a salamander to transform Manford into a fiery djinn named Daita. Batman battles Daita while Talia escapes, and Estergard comes to Batman's aid to battle the djinn. When Batman catches Talia, he is attacked this time by a large lizard man, who I'm just going to call Killer Croc. Overwhelmed, Batman is forced to flee atop a nearby train. Now, I did think it was kind of inconsistent that Estergard would lose to a djinn, but not to an outer god, and I just have to wonder if Estergard got captured on purpose.
Oh, I didn't think about that inconsistency, but I think your rationale would make sense considering what happens later in the story.
In the comic, Batman doesn't escape. He gets captured and taken to the sewers right away. But I really liked in this film how they gave him an opportunity to sort of like track down where exactly Talia and Ra's al Ghul would be underground in Gotham, which happens in the next scene. When Gotham City police find Bruce Wayne's ship frozen in Gotham Harbor, Dick Grayson investigates, only to find Sanjay frozen to death before being attacked by Killer Croc.
Can I just say that I'm really glad that Jason Todd didn't die at the hands of the Joker in this story? I'm so glad that the Joker didn't show up at all within this Batman story. Really refreshing.
I don't know. I think you could have easily made him like a crazed cult member or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it was no surprise when I read the comic that Jason Todd died. It was a huge surprise that Dick Grayson died.
Yeah, that was actually crazy. I thought eventually Dick Grayson was going to come back or something, but the stakes were very real in this story.
Yeah.
I was disappointed when I saw that happen, but I was like, it's Elseworlds, it still works.
Right, yeah. It's devastating, but it's not main continuity, so you can take a breath of fresh air. Now, by the time the police, Oliver, and Kylie reach the ship, it's too late. Dick is also dead, and Grendon and Croc are missing. Meanwhile, Talia uses the Testament of Ghul and sacrifices Daitya in order to resurrect and reform her father Ra's al Ghul's ashes. Back at Wayne Manor, Bruce researches the cult of Ghul and learns of an ancient underground mausoleum beneath Gotham where Talia may have taken the testament. As Ra's al Ghul and Talia perform a ritual to unleash a plague of reptiles on Gotham City, Batman finds them but is attacked by Killer Croc, whom Batman kills with a chlorine grenade before being swarmed by reptiles, causing a cave-in that drops Batman into a Lazarus pit, where he remains for days as the reptiles terrorize Gotham. Batman finally emerges from the pit to the surface just as Harvey Dent wins his mayoral campaign off a pledge to rid Gotham of the reptiles.
How come he didn't drown in the Lazarus pit? Does that not happen? Do you not drown in Lazarus pits?
That's a great question. Again, this isn't an issue that's raised in the comics. Batman just kind of escapes and stays in the sewer for days as these lizards kind of hound Gotham City. I think you can make the case that the Lazarus pit revives you, so it's impossible to drown in it. And I think it's better for him to fall into the Lazarus pit than just simply wander the sewers for days, personally.
Makes sense.
Deducing that Harvey Dent will serve as the gateway for Iog Sotha, Ross kills Grendon, allowing the seed within him to grow into the key that will unlock that gateway, seemingly a version of the villain Poison Ivy. As Batman, driven to near madness by the Lazarus pit and the death of his wards, seemingly converses with the corpse of Kirk Langstrom in the Batcave, Poison Ivy touches the left hand of the newly elected Mayor Dent, infecting him with a rash.
I didn't like that Mr. Freeze's sole purpose in this movie was basically to give birth to Poison Ivy. At that point, it felt like they were just introducing story elements into the plot for the sake of these Easter eggs.
You could make that argument. I thought it was clever how they sort of used his melted form to water that seed. His role in the story was kind of over and done with anyway. I don't know. I think it worked.
But like we never got to see Mr. Freeze fight Batman.
I mean, Batman only lasted like a week in Gotham before he died.
That's true.
So.
Yeah. Well, he still exists as, the Batman.
The man
which
Batman.
I think is fucking awesome.
It is cool. But I mean, there's other villains that'll be out there. And who knows, maybe there's another version of Mr. Freeze. This was Grendon, not Victor Freeze. So,
sure.
Now, when Kylie spies on Oliver Queen, she finds him garbed in knight's armor and surrounded by sacred weaponry, believing himself the one destined to prevent the emergence of Iog Sotha in order to make up for the sins of his father, including the murder of Bruce's parents. Kylie leaves and shares her concern for Oliver with Batman, seemingly knocking him out of his trance. Oliver is attacked by Poison Ivy, and the two manage to kill each other, though Batman arrives in time for Oliver to apologize and gift him with his sacred arrows and the blade that killed his parents. Meanwhile, Harvey Dent, his rash transformed into an eldritch growth, is visited by Talia. At the funeral for Dick and Sanjay, Commissioner Gordon delivers a message to Bruce asking him to meet his daughter Barbara, a disabled psychic known as an oracle being treated at Arkham Asylum. That night, Batman says goodbye to Alfred and Kylie before taking the Batmobile to Arkham, where Barbara helps him commune with his deceased father, Thomas Wayne. Thomas reveals that when he died, he was actually centuries old, having been one of the founders of Gotham back when it was a settlement. Having discovered the reptilian mausoleum underground, as well as the Testament of Ghoul, Thomas, Oswald, and the fathers of Oliver Queen and Kirk Langstrom performed an occult ritual that not only garnered them immortality and success, but awoke Ioxatha. Thomas prophesies that only the power of the bat, a creature capable of navigating the darkness, can stop the outer god.
What did you think of them turning Thomas Wayne into kind of a bad guy?
Well, I don't know if he was a bad guy, but I think his reputation as like an upstanding citizen was definitely tarnished. And, I think it works for the standalone story. You kind of see them exploring that in other stories as well, though, like Flashpoint.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I didn't mind it here, honestly. I actually really liked the fact that he got to commune with his father and not Professor Munford. Performing an occult ritual that summons bat spirits, Batman agrees to become one of them if they lead him to Ioxatha. Batman emerges at the Lazarus Pit, where he finds Harvey Dent waiting for him, the left side of his body now merged with a wall, a gateway open amongst the tentacles emanating from him. Batman enters the gateway and uses his sacred arrows to defeat the ghosts of Dick, Sanjay, and Oliver, as well as Talia, as they all try to prevent him from reaching Ra's al Ghul, who is performing the final ritual to summon Ioxatha. Batman and Ra's fight, during which time Ra's transforms into an eldritch monster and kills Batman, only for Batman to be resurrected in a powerful man-bat form.
Now, was this the coolest use of the phrase, I am Batman ever, or is it the absolute coolest?
It is definitely absolutely one of the coolest, for sure.
Yeah, that was so badass. Just like in his like demon bat voice, he's like, I am Batman. Yeah, it was so badass.
I've always liked vampire Batman for some reason. I don't know why. It just like adds to him in like a really cool way. And I just loved that this happened in the movie.
That was a standout moment, I think. It might even make maybe your list of nominations for the Brothers Award this year for Best Moment.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it didn't make it onto that list. Now, Batman kills Ra's too late, and as Ioxatha enters our reality, Batman unleashes Etrigan from the bottle that Daitia imprisoned him in after their battle. Etrigan burns the outer god and banishes him to hell in an explosion of hellfire that reaches the surface and also burns across Gotham City. Now, in the comic books, Ioxatha didn't come from like outer space. He actually came up from like the depths of this cave that they were in, which I thought
that would make more sense.
Yeah, it made more sense for sure. And I kind of wish they would have done that in this movie. I don't know why they changed it. That's probably like the one element that didn't make this adaptation that should have. Now, months later, as Gotham is being rebuilt by the Wayne Foundation, Kylie and other Gotham citizens honor Bruce Wayne, who is described as a savior of Gotham even in death, as we see him as a giant bat hiding in the church belfry. The coolest ending to any Batman movie, almost I think ever. So badass. Like he's still this watchful guardian over Gotham City, even though he's like doomed to this bat form for eternity.
It's definitely an alternate take on Batman, but, still faithful, I think, to the spirit of this creature protecting Gotham City,
Yeah.
Very well done for an Elseworld story.
I loved it. I just loved this movie. It was so good. It's a dark and well-paced Lovecraftian tragedy, showcasing pulp-horror twists on familiar characters that, will thrill fans of the Batman mythos. It definitely thrilled me. I'm giving this movie 4.5 out of 5 stars, a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
I would agree with that score. I think I told you as soon as I was done watching it, it's not going to get any less than 4 stars. And I could definitely see your argument for 4.5. I think it not only gave us this exciting new look on the take of what Batman could be in this alternate universe, which is always a lot of fun, with all these characters, but it's also just a fantastic glimpse into the world of Lovecraftian horror.
For sure.
Basically, as well as it could be done, I think, when incorporating these comic book superhero stories.
Right. I wish they would do more things like this. I love exploring different genres and things like that. There's just so much to love. Again, if you're not a fan of Batman or Lovecraft, this film may not work for you. You're probably like 4.5 stars. What are you talking about? But for me, I just got so much joy watching this movie, understanding many of the references, despite it being a tragedy.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you liked the movie. Like, I was nervous you weren't going to like it, but when you called me up after you saw it, I was like, hell yeah, it's amazing. Hell yeah.
I mean, it's dark, it's different, but it's absolutely worth your time. if you have any interest in this pulp horror genre.
Yeah, yes. But that does it for this review. Let us know what you thought about the movie by writing to us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by visiting us on Instagram or Twitter. You can find links to all of our accounts by checking out our show notes or visiting our website, dynamicduel.com.
And on our site, you can also find a link to our Patreon page where you can join our Dynamic 2.0 tier and chat with us and fellow listeners, our Fantastic 4 tier, which gets you bonus content each month, or our X-Force tier that makes you an executive producer of this podcast. If you can't join Patreon, you can still support the show by signing up for our e-newsletter at dynamicduel.com.
Or you could rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or on our website.
But this was the final episode before our big Team Duel event, which is coming out next week, where we're going to pit the Flash Rogues against the Brotherhood of Mutants, who are the X-Men bad guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. I have no idea who's going to win, but I think it's going to be pretty damn epic. We'll get into the big action next week.
But that does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers, Ken Johnson,
John Starosky,
Zachary Hepburn,
Dustyn Balcom,
Miggy Matanguihan,
Brandon Estergard,
Nathaniel Wagner,
Levi Yeaton,
Nick Abanto,
Austin Wesolowski,
AJ Dunkerley,
Scott Camacho,
Gil Camacho,
and Adam Speas for helping make this podcast possible. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Up, and away!
True believers.
Would you like fries with that?